Madison365 with your daily update for Wednesday, February 23rd. And we'll start with COVID numbers because this is going to be quick because not a lot to say here, which is good, right? 986 new cases today. That's the third consecutive day with fewer than 1,000 new cases. And that brings our 7-day average also down below 1,000, 982 now. Looks like the last time we were that low was August 4th. Yeah, this is our lowest 7-day average of new cases since August 4th. We're back to pre-Delta levels in terms of case count, which is not the best measure, right? That's not necessarily the best number to look at. The number we really want to look at is hospitalizations, which we'll get to in a minute, but also the positive test rate, which today is 6%. That's another one. We haven't seen that level since July 28th. So again, our positive test rate is also back to pre-Delta levels. Remember, Delta was the big surge we had like in August and September of last year. Then things kind of cooled down and Delta went away. They said Delta's over. It's great. Everything's fine. Then Omicron hit us and we were crazy. But we're back to pre-Delta levels right now, which is not to say everything's fine. 6% is still too high. 4% is still too high, right? You got to get that positive test rate down below 3% to feel like you really have the thing under control. If, however, this continues, like next week sometime, we'll be back below 3%. And we can all kind of breathe a sigh of relief at that point. Now, hospitalizations are still coming down, but the downward trajectory is leveling off a little bit, which I don't love. Nothing to panic about at this moment. But 663 people currently hospitalized. That's only 3 fewer than yesterday. That's still 151 fewer than a week ago. So we're still looking at 20%-ish decrease in the past 7 days, which is great. The ICU population, which had actually gone up yesterday, is back down again today. 135 out of the 663 people are in intensive care right now. That's 14 fewer than yesterday. So that's all, it's still headed in the right direction. It's just starting to not go down as quite as steeply as it was a week ago, which is fine. The 7-day average of new confirmed deaths is still 12, which again is much lower than I thought it would be. Even if Omicron had a less than 1% case fatality rate, we should be in the 60s or 70s. So when they said Omicron was not as severe, it was really not as severe. It did land a lot of people in the hospital. A lot of people were hospitalized. But due to a number of factors, that just did not translate into a big surge in deaths. Now, there were 17 new deaths confirmed yesterday. The fact that this average is staying low is no comfort to those 17 families, right, who lost someone to COVID in the past month or so. So you don't mean to dismiss those 12 deaths that are happening every day, right? But it could be a lot worse. And we still have 11,800 total confirmed deaths in the state of Wisconsin, which we'll hit 12,000 probably in the next few weeks. So all still, still high. We're still well ahead of where we were even last summer. Even when things were bad, like in the fall of 2020, when schools were closed and things felt horrible, we're still way ahead of that. But everything's getting better. That's the main thing. The trends are going down rapidly, and that's what we want to see. So that maybe by the time summer rolls around, life might be kind of back to normal almost, which would be very good. So we got a couple other news stories to talk about. I mentioned yesterday that Shannon Halsey had delivered the State of the Tribes address to the Wisconsin State Legislature. I did write up a recap of that. That is on Madison365.org right now, along with embedded video of the address. If you want to watch it, it's an hour long, roughly. I think well worth it if you're interested in Indigenous issues and in just the issues facing communities of color in Wisconsin. I think it's worth your time to just listen in while you're making dinner or whatever. But I pulled out a few highlights from that speech, especially regarding there are specific bills that were actually passed last year and that are still going to go through the process again after they got vetoed, that would basically bar or prohibit the teaching of honest history in the state of Wisconsin, because you don't want white people to feel bad. And you can imagine that Indigenous leaders, Native American people, would have a vested interest in the history being taught properly. So she had a few things to say about that. She also talked a little bit about opioid crisis and how that's been affecting Native communities, and specific efforts to work on that problem, as well as the right to vote, which is also being questioned in the state legislature. There are proposals that would make it more difficult to vote, and she reminded us, Shannon Halsey reminded us, that Native Americans were not citizens of the United States until 1924. Well into the 20th century, they could not vote. This is only about the third generation of Native American people who are allowed to vote. So she has very strong feelings about that too, about the ability to vote. And the fact that a lot of Indigenous people don't have traditional postal addresses just because of where they live. They just don't, the way the mail and the post office interacts on some Indigenous reservations is just different, right? They're not homeless. They just don't have an address that necessarily would work for a voter ID, that kind of thing. So a lot of that speech, she hit a lot of it, a lot of important topics. Again, I just pull out a few highlights, but the whole video is there so you can watch it yourself if you want to. Again, it's Shannon Halsey. She is the president of the Stockbridge Munsee Band of Mohican Indians. Also today, Dave Dahmer has a feature on Latino Academy of Workforce Development, which is an organization that, as the name implies, does job training as well as GED preparation and English language learning programs for Latino folks here in Dane County. It, until now, has been a program of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, and it is celebrating its 10th anniversary next week, and it's going to spin off and become its own independent nonprofit organization, which is a big deal. So Dave talked with the executive director, Baltazar de Anda Santana, about that, and has that story for us on Madison365.org right now. And finally today, it's a bit late, but in about 45 minutes, this organization that you see here, this is the Central Wisconsin Hmong Professionals. They have an event coming up that I don't know if you may or may not have been aware. We kind of reported on it a little bit when it happened, but back in August, the Marathon County Board, it took them a year to get to this point where they had a resolution before them to simply to say out loud that Marathon County is a community for all, and they couldn't do it. They literally voted down a resolution simply saying that Marathon County is welcoming to all people. They just couldn't bring themselves to say that officially. So after that, this organization and its president, his name is Lada Zhang Vang, have been having a series of events, conversations to help folks kind of cope with that a little bit. So there's an event tonight at 5:30, so in about 45 minutes. You can go on Madison365.org, click that story, and you can sign up and get a Zoom link and listen in if you want to. But Dr. Salika Ducksworth Lawton from UW-Eau Claire, she's a history professor there, and she also runs an organization called Uniting Bridges. She is going to make a presentation about, as a person of color, how do you navigate difficult conversations, especially in a professional environment, right? Because it's tough. Like there's microaggressions, there's people saying things whether they mean to or not. Intent doesn't matter, right? You can still impact somebody negatively if you don't mean to. And that means that you, as a person of color, you have every right to speak up, to say something. If I say something stupid, right? Whether I mean to or not. But that's not easy to do all the time. So Dr. Ducksworth Lawton is going to kind of help equip people for that. And white folks and other, non-Hmong people are welcome to attend as well, although it's primarily meant for Hmong and other sort of Southeast Asian folks. So that is happening again at 5:30 today. The information is on that story at Madison365.org. And last thing to say, I forgot to grab the graphic for this, but and at the national level, after this is in Austin, Texas, after the murder of George Floyd in 2020, there were a lot of protests everywhere across the country. Police didn't always comport themselves well in those protests, and 19 police officers in Austin, Texas have been indicted on state charges of assault and aggravated assault and basically abuse of authority, which is quite remarkable. So we will keep an eye on that case as it moves forward. That is all the news I have for you today. Have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We will talk to you soon.
This is 365 Media.